In this cartoon, our Eskimo friend, Harold, is forgetting one of the most fundamental precepts of economics. That is the law of supply and demand. This law states that the price of any good adjusts to bring the quantity supplied and the quantity demanded for that good into balance at an equilibrium price. This is to say, having a quantity of goods to sell is pointless without considering whether or how much people want to buy it. In the case of our friend Harold, the seller had a supply of something for which there is little demand, snow cones. Let's look at a graph to further elucidate what this means for Harold. In a normal climate, let's say a warm April day, the market equilibrium curve may look like this. Here, let's say the equilibrium price is $2 per snow cone. At $2, the quantity supplied and the quantity demanded balance. But what happens to that graph if the next day the weather drops 60 degrees and it begins to snow? Well, let's think intuitively.
We can reasonably assume that the weather getting colder will affect people's taste for snow cones, that is, their desire to buy that product. If it's wintertime, then we assume that the amount of snow cones that people want to buy at any given price decreases. This change is documented on our equilibrium graph by shifting demand curve to the left. This means that the quantity of snow cones demanded is lower at every price. As you can see, this means that the equilibrium price also reduces. From the looks of our cartoon, we can infer that snowy days are the norm for our two friends. In that case, their market equilibrium graph more closely resembles this one on a day-to-day basis. If Harold were a smart economist, he would reduce his price to match the demand, which in this case would be close to zero.
If Harold keeps producing and selling his snow cones at the original price of $2 and demand remains low or non-existent, there will be a surplus of snow cones, or the quantity of snow cones supplied will exceed the quantity demanded. In the graph, we've indicated Harold's surplus of snow cones in green. To understand why he won't adjust his price, let's look at input prices and technology. Having spent their lives in the ice, their technology for handling and processing ice is probably pretty advanced. In addition, Harold and his market are surrounded by ice, meaning his input price for that is probably non-existent. These are all factors that positively impact his production. However, Harold does experience certain drawbacks in his production, most importantly perhaps the cost of his input price for sugar and flavoring. These are high-cost agricultural products which will need to be imported to the Arctic from far away. Such imports are going to be expensive and cause him to transfer this price burden onto the consumers, who will end up paying a premium for snow cones.
How will the consumers react to the high prices? Well, first let's consider whether snow cones are a necessity. A product that is a necessity is a good which the general population would regard as essential for living. For this scenario, we'd argue that snow cones are not a necessity, and thus follow in line with the law of demand, which states that if the price of a good goes up, the quantity demanded for that good will decrease. In economic terms, we say that demand for snow cones is elastic. Depending on the price of a good, the quantity consumed will vary. On the other graph, we show the demand curve for water. Since water is a necessity, the demand isn't noticeably responsive to price changes, and therefore is said to be inelastic. In conclusion, we can assume that the consumers will not buy Harold's snow cones because of their high prices. As his friend suggests, Harold would lose money because he ignored demand and considered only supply in his economic calculation.